A new voice is about to be heard.
אתם צופים בערוץ החדשות I-24 News.
I-24 News launches its fourth channel in Hebrew, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
ותיעדו את הטבח.
I-24 News in Hebrew brings its international success for the past 10 years to Israel. Real-time news, sharp analyses, and passionate debates on the burning issues shaping Israeli society and the entire Middle East. And for you, English-speaking viewers, I-24 News offers a unique, immersive experience. Every day until 11 a.m. EST, Hebrew programs will be broadcast live with English subtitles. And from 11 a.m. EST, back to your favorite shows in English. More than ever, the heart of a new Middle East beats on I-24 News.
Hello everyone, this is I-24 News. First, our headlines. The United States keeps pressuring all sides to prevent a full-scale war in Lebanon. Political crisis looms as Israeli Supreme Court rules Haredi citizens must serve in the military. And as the Rafah operation draws to a close, what is the next step in the Gaza war? A full-scale war between Israel and Hezbollah is still a possibility, while the United States is putting endless efforts to prevent it. I-24 News, Balir Sladin is in northern Israel with the latest from there. Balir, take us there.
Yes, a few minutes ago, Hezbollah announcing for the fourth time today his responsibility for attacks against Israeli territory, specifically in the Golan Heights, or beside the Golan Heights, right there on the border. He said that they are targeting military activities there in Kafr Shuba Hills, the territory that Hezbollah actually claims to be belonging to Lebanon. This is the fourth time, as I said, and the Israeli airstrike has also struck Hezbollah military buildings in both El Adesi and El Khiyam. So we're seeing that the tit for tat, continues, but right on the border we don't see any escalation here, and this has been the situation since last weekend, actually. Maybe because Hezbollah doesn't want to give excuse to Israel for Israel to open this front as a full-blown war, or could be that Hezbollah is preserving their capabilities and their fighters in the case of full-scale war actually becomes reality here. Now everyone in the world now is trying to prevent this. We've seen that Annalena Baerbock, that has been in Israel, the German foreign minister, has just arrived in Beirut after talks with Israeli officials, of course trying to de-escalate the situation and warning of a possibility of war. And on the other hand, the Israeli officials, specifically the resigned minister Benny Gantz, just said that Israel has the capability to strike Hezbollah very harsh in Lebanon, but they are preferring, or like Israel is preferring, the diplomatic solution. But from what we understand from all the statements, it could be that we're just weeks away from escalating the situation, or at least weeks away from taking that decision whether to go for a military operation or not.
All right, Balir, thank you very much for that. Here in the studio with me are Professor Uzi Rabi, expert on the Middle East from Tel Aviv University, and Dani Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to Washington. Professor Rabi, take us to the risk management there. What's happening? Nobody wants a war, supposedly.
Well, we are in a very critical, I think, juncture here. What we do see is the first time when we understand that Gaza is no more actually the preferable. If we are going actually to end up the intensified, so to speak, stage, and that could lead to kind of shifting of a bunch of forces to the north, that would be kind of a sign that Israel is coming up with a different equation. Basically, Israel, as we are told, is definitely of the opinion that a diplomatic solution is the preferable for the time being. I am afraid that this is not going to be achieved, and here is the problem. Israel has to strike in order to just bring things to status quo ante, because what we have to do is to bring back all the people or inhabitants of the north that are basically currently sort of refugees in their own country. Once this is the case, Israel has to come up with kind of a new modus operandi. It is a democracy, but this is democracy in the Middle East. I think that the lesson to be learned from the 7th of October, that you cannot let yourself actually coming up with looking for the nitty-gritty details of where actually Hezbollah seniors are and how to hit them. This time, Israel must warn the world before, in advance, that Lebanon is going to pay the price. I hate to say that, because there are many, many Lebanese who are innocent, but basically Israel cannot afford itself another, I would say, saga like the one of Gaza we experienced in Gaza, because it is beyond the abilities of Israel, definitely at this stage. So if that comes to that, this is, in my opinion, what Israel should do.
Ambassador Ayalon, can the United States pull off a diplomatic solution after all?
Well, they're trying hard. I guess the special envoy of President Biden to the Lebanese affairs, Mr. Hochstein, has been here now for the third or fourth time. But I guess the key pretty much is held by Hezbollah or even in Tehran. Certainly once the, let's say, the intensive stage in Gaza is over, then all eyes will be set on the north. And as Professor Rabi said, Israel will not be able to ever accept a situation where Hezbollah is still smack dab against our borders. Basically, this is in defiance and flagrant breach of the 1701 United Nations Security Council resolution. So if Hezbollah will not voluntarily pull out and move at least 10 kilometers, which is beyond the direct, the range of the direct anti-tank missiles, then Israel will have to do it forcefully. I'm not sure that this is really the interest of Hezbollah and Tehran to waste their trump card fairly early in the game. Fairly early in the game, that means with that, where Iran is not quite ready for detonating a nuclear device. So this will be very much up to American diplomacy. And here, we hear that there are some kind of modalities that they're thinking about, maybe some corrections, minor correction on the border, in exchange of Hezbollah pulling north.
So if there's no choice, as you said, Professor Rabi, Israel was burned before in Lebanon, quite a few times, actually. So are we talking about a ground invasion? Are we talking about bombing out Lebanon and Israel in return? What's at stake here?
You know, stakes are higher at this stage. I guess that if Israel actually has to act militarily, because as I said before, in the absence of a diplomatic solution, this is what Israel should do. To what extent actually this military attack is going actually to just take place, we'll have to wait and see. Of course, this is a very, very tough decision, because I have to remind you, this is not the Lebanon we used to have in 82 or 2006. Now we know behind, on the back of Lebanon, there is kind of a corridor which is being stretched until Tehran, with Syria and Iraq in the middle, with a lot of pro-Iranian militias. And basically what Iran got on the 7th of October is, for the first time, tying up the loose ends and come up with all this set of proxies in order to show that it is the dominant force in the Middle East. I don't, maybe Iran is entertaining itself still to hit Israel and not to set back or not to go back, because this time actually it feels as if it gets the upper hand in this struggle, in this conflict. We'll have to wait and see, but this is why I say you can't actually act regularly, so to speak. What you have to do is to come with something that hasn't been seen here. Israel has to change its modus operandi and its verbal policy, by which to say to the world first and then to Lebanon that this time actually Lebanon is going to pay a heavy price. I'm not saying that Israel won't have to pay a price. This is something we have to just be aware of, and basically the Israeli public should be much knowledgeable, more knowledgeable about what the results could be. But this is something that Israel at a bay must do in order to be rescued from this situation, which is very, very problematic in the history of Israel and currently.
All right, we'll continue after watching this report by Ariel Osseran, I-24 News correspondent.
As Defense Minister Yoav Gallant is in Washington to alleviate some of the pressure over the continuation of Israel's military operation in Gaza and fears of a full-scale war with Hezbollah in Lebanon, in Israel, senior officials are signaling that Jerusalem and Washington are on the same page moving forward, especially following the latest visit by U.S. Special Envoy Amos Hochstein.
He believes that the change after the intensive operation in Rafah, in which practically Stage B is finished, the intensive phase of the operation in Gaza and moving to Stage C, the stage of deepening the achievements, he believes that this will give Hezbollah a kind of ladder to climb down from the daily solidarity which they demonstrated with the campaign that took place in Gaza, and it will be possible to start to talk about the arrangements in the north. We believe in this arrangement. There are some who are more skeptical than us, but both we and the Americans believe we will now dedicate long weeks for that in an attempt to reach an arrangement.
On Monday, Gallant held meetings with key administration officials, including CIA Director Bill Burns and Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The meetings included discussions on the next phase of the war in Gaza, the hostage issue, and the escalating fighting with Hezbollah, amid recent tensions between Jerusalem and Washington.
There is nothing more important for the future of the State of Israel, apart from the IDF, than the relationship with the U.S. from a security perspective. This is what we're talking about. We agree on most things. In areas where we have disagreements, we discuss everything in detail and reach agreements and solve issues.
Prior to his meeting with Gallant, the State Department shared Secretary Blinken's main messages to Gallant.
He's going to emphasize the need to avoid further escalation of the conflict. And then he will, as always, emphasize the need to improve humanitarian access, where we have seen somewhat of a slowdown in access in the south.
Meanwhile, a new UN-linked report determines there is currently no famine in Gaza, despite stark warnings of a full-blown one breaking out in the Strip. The new report by the UN's Hunger Monitoring System, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, or IPC, says that recent predictions of the quantity of food that would enter Gaza turned out to be wrong, and that supply of food to the Strip has increased. In contrast with the assumptions made for the projection period, March to July of 2024, the amount of food and non-food commodities allowed into the northern governorates increased, the report says. Additionally, the response in the nutrition, water sanitation, and hygiene and health sectors was scaled up. In this context, the available evidence does not indicate that famine is currently occurring. Despite that, the study says that, quote, extreme human suffering is without a doubt currently ongoing in the Gaza Strip, warning that the slight improvement in the situation should not allow room for complacency about the risk of famine in the coming weeks and months.
Back to the studio, Ambassador Ayalon, the Biden administration is clearly treating Gallant, the defense minister, differently than they treat Prime Minister Netanyahu. They say this out loud. What does it mean for the outcome?
Well, they certainly see Gallant as a partner. They see him as the right interlocutor because they see in the same way how to get out of Gaza, to finish the military operation and then move to the next level, whereas we need to have a regime of, which is not Hamas, of course, that would govern in a civil, with the civil affairs of Gaza. And of course, they would like to see also a grander plan moving towards Saudi Arabia and mentioning some political path with the Palestinians. On all these issues, Gallant is very agreeable. And also, by the way, the military. I would also dare to say that Netanyahu also understands and would agree to that had he not had these concerns of Smotrich and Ben Gvir bringing down the government. So the Americans pretty much gave up on Netanyahu. We see it with their rhetoric, and they continue to help Israel in a massive way, as many of them say, despite Netanyahu. And this is even before he's going to show up in Congress. It's not yet clear whether this will pan out or not, but at this point, if he goes to Washington, there will not be a pretty welcome for him, which may even deteriorate further Israel's image here and the alliance between Israel and the United States, which is really one of the mainstays of the stability in the region.
Professor Rabi, how is the Arab world looking at this rift between Biden and Netanyahu and Biden and Netanyahu?
Well, I mean, for the Arab states, and I'm talking about, let's say, the Sunni potential partners of Israel and the United States, they are pretty worried about that. Because as long as they do see the United States not strictly stand to Israel or with Israel against the bad guys, and let me remind our listeners that the bad guys in the eyes of United Arab Emirates, Egypt, even Jordan in a way, and definitely Saudi Arabia, are both Iran and Muslim brothers, which is Hamas. This is something that actually brings in a lot of anxiety when it comes to those states, especially Saudi Arabia. Because what the Saudis are after is to have a military backup provided by the US and kind of a green light for, let's say, actually developing nuclear capacity for civilian purposes, let's put it that way. But basically, this is kind of a test case. In my opinion, the United States is mistaken, where politics are everywhere, and we can say that what the United States, and this is understandable, would like actually to prevent a war, and because it goes against the, the political realm in the States.
We'll talk about this
but it's very complicated.
Later. And but now Israel's Supreme Court issued a landmark ruling today regarding the Haredi community's exemption from military service. That has major political implications. I-24 News' Joe Brown reports.
A historic decision with a twist of irony. Having spent the first half of his third stint in office trying to reduce the powers of the High Court, the premiership of Benjamin Netanyahu could now come crashing down due to a decision from that same court. On Tuesday morning, Israel's top court unanimously announced that, after decades of military exemption, students at ultra-Orthodox seminaries, known as yeshivas, have to serve in the IDF. Furthermore, the court also ruled that the government must cease funding yeshivas that prevent students from serving in the military. The push for this decision was prompted by the expiration of a law in July 2023, which provided a blanket exemption on ultra-Orthodox Jews serving in the IDF, and the greater need for soldiers following Israel's multi-frontal war in Gaza, Lebanon, and the West Bank. According to figures from the IDF, only about 1,300 of the 13,000 young ultra-Orthodox adults eligible for service join the army annually, a rate of around 10%. Approximately 63,000 ultra-Orthodox Jews are currently exempt. The court decision has not gone down well with ultra-Orthodox Jews, who had received immunity from the draft since the days of David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister.
I think that only God protects us. You may think that the army is protecting you. That's wrong. There is only one who protects us. And so we will not join the army because God said not to join the army. And we only obey him because he protects us from everything.
But the ruling has received support from Israel's opposition.
The games are over. The shady deals are over. The days when some shout, "Will die and not serve," and others die because they served are over. The discrimination between blood and blood is over. And a more lukewarm response from members of Netanyahu's coalition.
This ruling actually doesn't have any implications, any practical implications. It's more of a declaration more than anything else. It doesn't add anything to the defense issue at this time. So it's very hard to give any credit to this ruling. It doesn't mean much. In fact, the High Court shouldn't have interfered at all in this issue.
And this will be Netanyahu's greatest political headache. His governing coalition, propped up by ultra-Orthodox and far-right parties, are opposed to this decision, which could lead to them leaving the government, forcing its collapse and new elections. Lawyers defending the government in this case said that forcing the ultra-Orthodox to join the army would, quote, tear Israeli society apart. But with the majority of Israelis supporting the lifting of this special dispensation, the success of the court decision will largely depend on the way it will be implemented.
So let's talk about the political ramifications of what's happening. Ariel Osirani is here in the studio. Is this a threat to the coalition government?
Broadly speaking, yes, because this is the one law that managed to, I think, dissolve the most amount of governments in Israeli political history. I mean, Israel's pretty much been in a sort of a constitutional crisis since 2019, when the law expired, the law that allowed the exemptions. Then the government passed another law that expired in June of 2023. They asked for 10 months extension, but October 7 happened, and then they didn't get to work on the extension. And so now we do see that there's a lot of tension between the different elements of the coalition, mainly the ruling Likud party and the Orthodox parties. The Orthodox are indicating that they will not agree to anything that changes the current situation, the exemption, but we are seeing two interesting developments tonight. The first, the Attorney General, Galia Barav Miara, basically instructing the government to enlist 3,000 Haredi students in addition to the Haredis that are already, the ultra-Orthodox that are already serving in the military. They need to be drafted immediately in order for them to have a full military service. She also indicated this will be only the beginning, albeit the Supreme Court justices did not give a time frame. Here the AG is giving a time frame. And the second interesting development, more in the political nature, is the chairman of the Knesset's Foreign and Security Committee, Yuli Edelstein, from the Likud, saying that either this bill passes with a broad consensus or it will not pass at all. He is not the only voice in the ruling Likud party saying this, and so not only is there tensions or potential disagreements between different parties in the coalition, but even inside the ruling party there are disagreements regarding how to move forward on this law.
Ambassador Alon, let me bring your political experience here. Do you see here a time bomb inside the coalition?
Absolutely. If you read the publications of the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox papers and magazines, you see how they lament about breaking of the historic alliance that they had with the religious Zionist movement, that the religious Zionist movement now prefer the secular Zionism, and this makes sense because the religious Zionists, they are fighting shoulder to shoulder with their brothers, the secular, and this is not sustainable, not from a I would say from a moral point of view, and this is why the Supreme Court has addressed the issue of equality, which has been breached for a long time. But now there is another factor, which is the most important one, is that Israel does not have enough manpower for its military following the 7th of October fiasco. The Chief of Staff said that the IDF is missing now 15 battalions. This is about two and a half divisions. And at the end of the day, I think the IDF will need even more than that. So I think that the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, are now in a corner. If they are smart, they will be coming into a some kind of a modus operandi, which will allow them to draft, will give the needs of the military, and they still will have enough that will stay out of the military. But if they do not come to terms, then all of them will be obliged to to get drafted, whether the military wants it or not.
I have to tell you, I've interviewed many of this circle of leaders. No chance for big numbers being drafted. What do you say?
You know, politically speaking, I agree with Danny. That could be definitely a time bomb. But, you know, paradoxically speaking, in my opinion, actually looking in kind of a broader scope, this is the first positive repercussion of the 7th of October. This is time for Israel actually to be changed, to start changing itself. And let me paraphrase over Winston Churchill's one most known aphorisms: never let a good crisis to go waste. This is exactly what I think. The 7th of October is also an opportunity for Israel to start actually channel itself to some other direction. This is the right step in the right direction, even if it is with so many problems in it.
Real.
And anticipating the challenges down the line, one of the main points that the opposition to this ruling will raise is, okay, if the ultra-Orthodox need to go, why don't the Arabs go? Now, the response to that is that there are currently more Muslim Arabs serving in the military than ultra-Orthodox. That's the first thing that needs to be stated. But indeed, just like Uzi said, this could set the stage moving forward for really correcting many of these weird situations that have been put in place to exempt one group or another, and could be more
injustices.
But before that happens, you'll see a lot of infighting inside Israel, and as you well know, this is something that also affects the enemy.
I agree. I think I'm talking about the long shot, and I do believe that that kind of a crisis is, I won't say right in time, because it is very, very, it's a painful shot and hit to the Israeli ethos or the Zionist ethos. But without it, I guess Israel actually would never find kind of an opportunity to start change itself. In my opinion, this is the beginning. We are having kind of a long march, but I anticipate kind of a new Israel in the horizon by all means and proposal.
Yeah, definitely a very strong shockwave out of October 7th. We'll take a short break, and we'll be back with more news. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.
must reach the whole world. The I-24 News Channel, broadcasting from Israel, with dozens of correspondents throughout the world, brings the truth from Israel to hundreds of millions of people in scores of countries.
Completely gunned down in their beds.
De la frontière qui sépare Israël.
The state of emergency and war in Israel.
Bringing Israel's story to the world. I-24 News Channels. Now on Hot.
Welcome back. As the Rafah operation draws to a close, what is next in the Gaza war? I-24 News' Robert Swift reports.
After weeks of operating inside Gaza's most southerly city, the IDF says its operation in Rafah is drawing to a close.
We are clearly approaching the point where we can say we have dismantled the Rafah brigade, that it is defeated, not in the sense that there are no more terrorists, but in the sense that it can no longer function as a fighting unit. Many have been killed, and you will ensure until the completion of the mission here to eliminate as many terrorists and destroy as much infrastructure as possible in the future.
But while the Israeli military has clearly caused its enemy casualties in Rafah, both Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad seem intent on continuing their fight. Rocket and mortar fire from out of Gaza, even from out of Rafah, have slightly increased recently, and attacks against the IDF inside Gaza continue daily. Israel seeks to transition from fighting a war inside Gaza to something closer to how it operates in the West Bank, launching targeted raids into the Strip as and when required, freeing up resources to secure Israel's northern border. But not all actors are convinced.
From our perspective, what it means is the importance of working on all these plans for the day after the conflict, because we don't want to see in Rafah what we've seen in Gaza City, what we've seen in Khan Yunis, which is the end of major combat operations, and in the beginning of Hamas reasserting control and reasserting activity in those areas.
Let's go live to the south. I-24 News' Pierre Clochandler is in southern Israel tonight. Pierre.
Good evening, Jacob.
Give us the latest from there, Pierre.
Hello?
Yes, we are with you.
All right. Well, I just want to complete with what Rob said. The army estimates that about 750 Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists have been killed since the start of the operation in Rafah, early May. Now, it says that the most of the intense fighting now is in two neighborhoods of Rafah, Tel El Sultan on the western edge of Rafah, and Shabura, which is in the eastern center edge of Rafah. There is a lot of intense fighting and a lot of booby-trapped tunnel shafts, homes, apartment buildings, etc. The thing is, the assessment is that the offensive is going to draw to a close in Rafah in the coming days or maybe a week or so. And that means that if there is one division operating in Rafah and another one operating in the center of the Gaza Strip to assert control of the Gaza corridor, which separates Gaza North from Gaza South, after Rafah, there'll be some sort of pullout, but there will still be two divisions for launching operational raids on targeted sites of Hamas and Islamic Jihad, which haven't been neutralized yet. And the army will keep control of the Philadelphia corridor, which runs along the border between the Gaza Strip and Egypt, simply because there's so many tunnels for smuggling weapons and ammunition that the Israeli army, it will take a couple of months, if not more, in order to identify those tunnels and to neutralize them. Some of those tunnels might be in a depth of 50 meters below ground. That means a lot of work. Yet, if this operation is drawing to a close in Rafah, that will mean that Israel will enter the third phase of the war, which means basically low-intensity fighting. According to the IDF jargon, it means mowing the grass, mowing the lawn. That means not allowing Hamas to resurrect itself.
Okay, Pierre, thank you very much. Pierre Clochandler in southern Israel this evening. Here in the studio, our Professor Uzi Rabi, expert on the Middle East from Tel Aviv University, and Ambassador Dani Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to Washington. What's next in Gaza, Professor?
Well, I mean, this is another very, very sensitive and very important moment for Israel. I hope that Israel is not going to end up the war in Gaza, and the low intensity, let us say, operation from now on is just for the sake of visibility. We have to go on with this very, very important and imperative war against Hamas, because whoever thinks of the day after can do nothing without Hamas being uprooted, both militarily and politically. Once again, there are many who are coming up with this notion of there is no way you can definitely defeat ideology. I do agree with that, but this is not the goal Israel actually introduced from the beginning. ISIS was a caliphate. It was crushed by the United States. Ideology is still there.
Took years, though. Many years.
And this is exactly what we're going to have here. So here's the thing. There should be kind of a Magna Carta by which Israel, in a transparent way, provide actually its program, basically in broad lines, to the public. I mean, we have to understand that this is not to be achieved now with the transition to stage 3, as they put it. Second, Hezbollah is another actually problem to tackle with. And as I said before, this is not Hezbollah of 82, neither 2006. Once again, we have to understand Hezbollah is part and parcel of a big machinery where the engine is Tehran. And one of the things we don't know is what would be actually Iran's response. This is why I think the instrumentality of the US is being called upon in order to make sure that the don't that we do remember should be directed not to Hezbollah but to Iran.
And there's, of course, the hostage problem, Ambassador, and we've heard the Israel's national security advisor today saying that you cannot destroy the idea of Hamas, which raised some attacks by the right wing here in Israel. So what's the strategy of the Israeli government?
Well, I wish I knew. I wish they knew. I'm not sure that the Israeli government knows the strategy. So far, it was only tactical movements, and we do not see. I mean, maybe I'll reverse myself. Maybe there is a strategy, and the strategy is a strategy of Ben Gvir and Smotrich, which is not to end the war, to continue the war, to the extent of maybe having back some Jewish settlements in Gaza. Of course, this is not achievable, this is not sustainable. Even the Prime Minister said that it's not realistic. So I would say that now that the IDF will have its, let's say, major operation over, and now they will go into the third stage, as they say, of mowing the lawn. That means that going after any insurrections of Hamas, there would be, I would say, two important elements. One is if the IDF continues, if Israel continues to keep the Philadelphia road, that means deny Hamas from having more munitions or even having the production, the production tools.
That's the Egyptian border, yeah.
Yes, right, and also that to deny them the capability to build arms and the rockets and all that, then I think Israel could go back into the negotiation table with the offer that was actually made public by President Biden, but he ascribes it, of course, to Netanyahu. And that would mean maybe holding the war as it is now. But of course, if there is a hot pursuit, if they see some kind of an organization of Hamas, they will be able to go after that. They will keep the Philadelphia. They will have to keep actually all the buffers around Gaza. This is something that Israel cannot
Hamas
give
would
up.
say no deal for that.
Well, unless the Hamas will understand that as they continue to, let's say, to stand as they are against any deal, the IDF will continue encroach on all their assets. And at the same, at the end of the day, they will be able maybe to even defeat many of the tunnels that right now exist and the IDF did not get to. But let's say with the obstinance of Hamas, with their refusal to go into any kind of a settlement, then the IDF will have full legitimacy to go after them. The problem, of course, is the hostages. I'm sure that we know where Sinwar is. However, if he surrounds himself at gunpoint, Israeli hostages, there's not much we can do, unfortunately, unless he will at some point get enough fatigued that maybe he will even be willing to go out of Gaza.
We'll get back to this, but meanwhile, a group of students from North America are completely changing their life plans, choosing to delay university and enlist in the IDF instead. Our correspondent, Nicole Tzedek, has their story.
We all knew that we wanted to come to Israel next year. We didn't want to just go to college straight away. So we found a gap year between going to college and going to the army. Found a gap year in Israel.
These 5 students from North America decided to push off college last summer, coming to Israel instead and participating in Five Fingers Pre-Military Training Academy.
In a purpose to make those graduates that finish the Mechina to be and impact people on their surrounding, on the society.
The goal isn't to enlist in the IDF, but after 10 months at the campus, each of these students plans on just that, already envisioning where they want to be.
Combat instructor.
Special Forces.
Commandos. Special Forces.
What really changed their minds since the program started in August 2023 were the events from 2 months later.
The biggest part was the war that happened back in October. I think it was just one of the most significant things that happened in my life and really just helped me figure out what I want to do.
My family really wanted me to come back, but I was scared that if I leave, then it would be kind of like running away from reality.
They're all choosing to face the reality firsthand, putting their Five Fingers training to use in real life.
As a kid from Canada, I don't do these special types of army crawls in the grass. I don't do this types of sprinting that the Israelis do. So it's a very different type of training that I had to get used to.
It's not our purpose that they will go to the army. I think that they live with this kind of a team that talk about the army, talk about values, talk about how they can influence. They automatically get in. I feel very proud of them.
As much as they want to help the state of Israel, it's also about what's happening back home.
All my friends are in college now. They tell me about the stuff they see, and I say to myself, wow, how lucky I am not to be there experiencing something like that, really, because I don't think I could take that personally.
I think it's so close to home, even though it's so far, because we all were planning on going back to college and learning. And after hearing this and everything that's been happening, and my friends call me all the time telling me the anti-Semitic stories that have been happening. And I think it just tells us that, wow, like we need to be here, we need to help.
Choosing a combat zone over a college campus, fully understanding the dangers they're signing up for.
If that means paying the price of possibly risking my life, that's what it means. And I'm paying the price for all Jews all over the world to have a safe place to live in Israel.
15 former students from Five Fingers have been killed during the war, including one who attended the prep school just last year.
This really shows what kind of soldiers this place, the special Mechina, the special place really makes. These make highly motivated soldiers that really want the best for Israel, what's best for the army, and they're willing to sacrifice their life to give back to this country, to protect this country.
A country that wasn't always their home, but certainly is now.
I think it's a part of us. I think we have to do it. I don't think that's like they asked us to do, and we're like, oh, okay, we have to do this. This is our country as well. We came here, we wanted to do this. Okay, so there's a war. It's our responsibility. You know, we're very much capable of going to help people.
Which is what they'll all be doing by the end of the year, when they formally enlist in the IDF and join the fight. Reporting from Zikron Yaakov, Nicole Zedek for I-24 News.
Good luck. The UK, France and Germany have issued a joint statement following the UN Security Council meeting on Iran's nuclear program. I-24 News' Bianca Zanini reports on that.
The world is worried about Iran's nuclear program. The country now has enough near-weapons-grade nuclear fuel to produce 3 bombs.
Very concerningly, the IAEA Director General's recent reports again show that Iran is moving in the wrong direction by continuing to escalate its nuclear activities far beyond the limits of the Iran nuclear deal, the so-called JCPOA. Iran's nuclear advances, some of which are irreversible, have hollowed out the JCPOA and will continue to make a return to a negotiated solution more difficult.
The French, British and German ambassadors to the UN gave a joint statement warning that Iran's lack of cooperation on the nuclear issue could have dire consequences.
Iran is growing its stockpile of high-enriched uranium to levels unprecedented for a state without a nuclear weapons program. Such activity has no credible civilian justification.
This after the UN Security Council discussed the implementation of Resolution 2231, which states Iran's nuclear commitments under the nuclear deal. The resolution expires in October 2025, meaning there's just over 1 year to find a diplomatic solution to the Iran nuclear crisis. This month alone, the IAEA, the UN's nuclear watchdog, censored Iran for failing to cooperate fully with the agency and said Iran has started up new cascades of advanced centrifuges with plans to install more. According to the IAEA, Iran is now enriching uranium to up to 60% purity, close to the 90% of weapons grade, and has enough material enriched to that level. Another recently published report by the Institute for Science and International Security said that Tehran is set to triple or even quadruple its uranium enrichment capacity at Fordow, which is one of the country's most secretive nuclear facilities.
Iran's accumulation of high-enriched uranium, its continuously growing enriched uranium stockpile, and the expansion of its nuclear enrichment infrastructure are alarming. Such actions carry very significant proliferation-related risks and raise grave concerns about Iran's intentions. Moreover, Iran's consistent lack of cooperation with the IAEA is affecting the IAEA's ability to carry out its monitoring duties and impedes it from providing assurances that Iran's nuclear program is exclusively peaceful.
The Biden administration has threatened to respond to Iran if it further accelerates its uranium enrichment. On Friday, Iran will elect a new president, and whoever emerges as the winner will inherit the rapidly advancing nuclear program and the international crisis it's spurring.
Back to the studio, Professor Rabi, this is actually the serious problem here in nuclear Iran.
You know, I've been saying actually time and again that Iran will go nuclear. I think that, you know, this is a threshold situation, a threshold state, so to speak. And it is for them to decide whether and when they are going actually to just make the breakthrough. I think that if we talk about Israel, we should also prepare ourselves to nuclear Iran Middle East. And this is kind of a different opera. I don't think there are pros, there are cons, but we have to just make sure we are there. I don't think United States is going to do something dramatic in that regard, because I see that what they are trying actually to just find out is kind of a way by which to postpone the thing with sort of another diplomatic, I would say, agreement, which good for nothing when it comes to that kind of a player. I think, though, that what Iran has managed to do skillfully is to build up all this set of proxies, compile what I would say a fire ring, as they call it, against Israel and Saudi Arabia, but at the same time actually went on with this nuclear capacity thing, enrichment and stuff. And today, this is why I said before that what we have to just take into account that those guys are going to have maybe new ideas after they saw the poor performance of Israel in the 7th of October, after they saw that actually this set of proxies is really something, blood theater that is being controlled by them in the Middle East. And it is very, very important whether the free world, so to speak, especially the US, would actually rise to the occasion and come up with something by which to halt Iran. Because this is what Iran is trying to question about, whether the West actually has got it or not. And this is time for the free world to come up with that.
Yeah. I actually have a quote from Israeli Defense Minister Gallant in Washington right now saying you've promised that Iran will not go nuclear, so that now is the time to deliver. That's what he said. Can the United States afford a nuclear Iran?
No, they cannot, because one of the major consequences would be a nuclear arms race in the Middle East and even beyond. If Iran becomes nuclear, Saudi Arabia will follow suit, Egypt will follow suit, Turkey will follow suit, and this is the end of the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty that the Americans worked so hard to establish. So I think there are a few things to look at. First of all, with all due respect, that it's a danger that the Iranians have enough uranium now that they could enrich. You know, right now it's 60%, but to the 90% is a real small step. But what the important thing to look at is the weapon group. That means once you have the enriched uranium is not enough, because you have to actually assemble it on a nuclear head, and you have to also assemble it with the right switches and with the right mechanism. This could be maybe 1.5 years, 2 years away. So there is a long time in that respect to set up some kind of modalities, going back to the JCPOA or whatever. Interestingly enough, the countries which are most harsh on Iran is not the United States, but the Europeans. You know, and in the Europeans, France is the lead. So we'll have to really wait and see. If you add another two more quick elements, is that whoever is the next president of the United States, it will be his last term. That means he will be devoid of political implications, so he may go tough on Iran.
And he will have to deal with that.
Yeah.
You've mentioned France. Jordan's King Abdallah and French President Macron met in Paris to discuss the developments in Gaza. So let's talk about this with Dr. Nasir Al-Omari, who joins us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The king has many reasons to be worried. What can France do for him?
Well, France can help convince the Israeli government to reduce the land restrictions on the humanitarian aid going into Gaza. After reports from the United Nations, or pending reports, saying that 1 out of 5 Palestinians are starving, and others are finding it difficult to find food and vital supplies for 1 or 2 or a few days. The king believes that this is a big problem, because he has been pushing for a ceasefire that has not happened. So a starvation in Gaza would really make him look like he's just sitting around. So he believes that this will, if France can pressure Israel to improve the humanitarian situation, that will buy everybody some time to deal with this war.
Now, with Iran behind his back, and the majority of the population in Jordan obviously being Palestinian, is the king in trouble?
Well, he's definitely not comfortable with the situation. His positions vis-a-vis Israel are unpopular. As you mentioned, probably a majority of Jordanians are Palestinians. They have seen how the king played a vital role in downing these Iranian projectiles. He's viewed as someone who's actively helping Israel. So that can't be good for the king. Iran also views Jordan as the next target. They have been smuggling weapons. The Syrian regime has been smuggling drugs through Jordan to Saudi Arabia. And there are these plots of smuggling weapons to the West Bank, to Hamas in the West Bank. And these same weapons can be used against the king and his people, his government. So definitely, the king is not very comfortable right now. And I think he's looking forward to seeing an end to Gaza war as a way to stabilize Jordan.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Nasir Al-Omari. Comment from you, Professor Rabi.
Well, to say that the king is not comfortable with that is just to say the least. He is anxious, not to say horrified, about the constant Iranian efforts to ignite, protest and whatever in Jordan, using Jordan as kind of a bridgehead to the West Bank, and I dare say also toppling the monarchy. If we can have the opportunity, Jacob, just to open up the scope to the Middle Eastern map, you would see that this is the last remnant that must be actually capitalized on for Iran in order to have the full arc. Basically, this is it.
Danny, we have about a minute. Does Israel do enough to help the king?
Well, I think yes. Militarily, for sure. Politically, I'm not sure Israel can do that. The best thing that the king would like is to see a political process with the Palestinians that right now the government of Netanyahu cannot give it. But under the radar, a lot of cooperation on the military side is going on.
Including that night in April when all these missiles came from Iran to Israel. Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you.
This would be it for us. Stay tuned for more news with Kalev Ben David here on I-24 News. Have a good night from Tel Aviv.
A new voice is about to be heard.
אתם צופים בערוץ החדשות I-24 News.
I-24 News launches its 4th channel in Hebrew, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
ותיעדו את הטבח.
I-24 News in Hebrew brings its international success for the past 10 years to Israel. Real-time news, sharp analyses, and passionate debates on the burning issues shaping Israeli society and the entire Middle East. And for you, English-speaking viewers, I-24 News offers a unique, immersive experience. Every day until 11 a.m. EST, Hebrew programs will be broadcast live with English subtitles. And from 11 a.m. EST, back to your favorite shows in English. More than ever, the heart of a new Middle East beats on I-24 News.
Welcome to this special broadcast on I-24 News. I'm Kalev Ben David. It is day 263 of Israel at war. On the security front, the IDF launching airstrikes on terror facilities in Gaza and Hezbollah targets in Lebanon as air raid sirens ring out in both north and south. On the political front, a landmark decision by Israel's Supreme Court ruling that draft exemptions for ultra-Orthodox Jews must end as the army struggles with manpower needs. And on the diplomatic front, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant continues his discussions with top U.S. officials on determining the course of the conflict, telling U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin today that full defeat of Hamas must remain as a key goal. This as a new UN report addresses the question of whether there really is a famine in Gaza. Our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran has more in this report.
As Defense Minister Yoav Gallant is in Washington to alleviate some of the pressure over the continuation of Israel's military operation in Gaza and fears of a full-scale war with Hezbollah in Lebanon, in Israel, senior officials are signaling that Jerusalem and Washington are on the same page moving forward, especially following the latest visit by U.S. Special Envoy Amos Hochstein.
He believes that the change after the intensive operation in Rafah, in which practically Stage B is finished, the intensive phase of the operation in Gaza and moving to Stage C, the stage of deepening the achievement. He believes that this will give Hezbollah a kind of ladder to climb down from the daily solidarity which they demonstrated with the campaign that took place in Gaza, and it will be possible to start to talk about the arrangements in the north. We believe in this arrangement. There are some who are more skeptical than us, but both we and the Americans believe we will now dedicate long weeks for that in an attempt to reach an arrangement.
On Monday, Gallant held meetings with key administration officials, including CIA Director Bill Burns and Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The meetings included discussions on the next phase of the war in Gaza, the hostage issue, and the escalating fighting with Hezbollah, amid recent tensions between Jerusalem and Washington.
There is nothing more important for the future of the State of Israel, apart from the IDF, than the relationship with the U.S. from a security perspective. This is what we're talking about. We agree on most things. In areas where we have disagreements, we discuss everything in detail and reach agreements and solve issues.
Prior to his meeting with Gallant, the State Department shared Secretary Blinken's main messages to Gallant.
He's going to emphasize the need to avoid further escalation of the conflict. And then he will, as always, emphasize the need to improve humanitarian access, where we have seen somewhat of a slowdown in access in the south.
Meanwhile, a new UN-linked report determines there is currently no famine in Gaza, despite stark warnings of a full-blown one breaking out in the Strip. The new report by the UN's Hunger Monitoring System, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, or IPC, says that recent predictions of the quantity of food that would enter Gaza turned out to be wrong, and that supply of food to the Strip has increased. In contrast with the assumptions made for the projection period, March to July of 2024, the amount of food and non-food commodities allowed into the northern governorates increased, the report says. Additionally, the response in the nutrition, water sanitation, and hygiene and health sectors was scaled up. In this context, the available evidence does not indicate that famine is currently occurring. Despite that, the study says that, quote, extreme human suffering is without a doubt currently ongoing in the Gaza Strip, warning that the slight improvement in the situation should not allow room for complacency about the risk of famine in the coming weeks and months.
Well, let's go now to northern Israel and our correspondent Balir Sladin, who is near the Israel-Gaza border. And Balir, Americans apparently think the diplomatic solution is still an option, but if you look at what's happening there, including today, that seems to be far off at this point.
Yes, well, the attacks continues from Hezbollah. They are taking responsibility for 5 attacks until now, and although that all of the attacks are right on the border, on the military sites here in the north, but still a situation that Israel cannot accept, and specifically because of the fact that the civilians that evacuated since October 8th, when the hostilities started, still can't go back to their homes safely, and this is the main goal for the Israeli Israeli public and the Israeli political level, of course. We've heard that today also from the resigned minister Benny Gantz when he said in the conference in Herzliya that the goal should be bringing back the civilians here, the population here, to their homes before the 1st of September, which means before the beginning of the school year. We know that now families, of course, are struggling because of the fact that they are not at their homes and are separated and they are in different places in Israel, and that's of course a struggle for all of these families. We're hearing also, and if we want to conclude the statements that we're hearing from the Israeli politicians, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as the Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, Israel, and also National Security Advisor Tzachi Hanegbi, Israel still gives a chance for the diplomatic option, but of course it can't continue this way forever. Maybe, according to the reports, we're talking about only weeks for the Israeli political level to take that decision whether to go for a military operation or not, and that's why Gallant right now is in Washington in order to try to bring the Americans alongside Israel in terms of ammunition and maybe even in terms of supporting Israel militarily at some way or another, in some way or another.
All right, Balir Sladin there in northern Israel by the Lebanon border. Thank you for that. And with us in studio, we have Reserves IDF Brigadier General Hanan Geffen, the former commander of the 8200 Intelligence Unit, and Avi Meir, the former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post, and now co-chair of the Advisory Board of Global Jewry. Hanan, we're hearing the politicians in Israel keeping the Americans happy, saying, well, they still believe there could be a diplomatic solution. But realistically, is that what the military establishment believes, that Hezbollah is going to honor agreements made nearly 2 decades ago, finally, and pull their fighters away from the border?
Well, weighing the answer, I'm looking for hints from Lebanon, within Lebanon. Not what the Israeli politician says, but what the noises are coming from Lebanon. And I heard in the last day 2 voices, very interesting one. One from the Christian Maronite community, with both of its parties are very, I would say, preparing for the war and threatening Hezbollah not to drag Lebanon into war. And in other words, we are preparing to use force to defend ourselves, and this is threatening because Lebanon could fall apart as a country. This is one voice, and it might influence Nasrallah to reconsider whatever he's doing. I would say the other voice, and also interesting, is the go-between. The most influential one is the guy called Nabi Berri. The chairman of the Lebanese parliament is a Shiite of the Amal, is the head of the Amal movement, sister party of the Hezbollah party. And he said, they asked us, Hezbollah, to withdraw 8 kilometers. We agree if Israel withdraw 8 kilometers as well. So there is a hint that something is moving, something they are trying to find a ladder to step down. So we still have to get to give the diplomatic lane a chance.
A chance, but unfortunately, we'll have to see if that will work. I want to turn to this UN report on the famine, because, as it said, there is no famine in Gaza, even though much of the international media has been saying that for months. And in fact, even today, the coverage of the report is, well, there could be, or it's close to famine in Gaza. But in fact, the question is whether this report will in fact help Israel, buy Israel at least some diplomatic maneuvering room with the United States at this time.
Well, Kalev, the only surprising thing about this report is that it was issued by an organization that is affiliated with the UN. It is certainly not surprising that there is no famine in Gaza. Israel would not permit there to be. Israel knows it has a humanitarian obligation to the people of Gaza, even as it's engaged in intense warfare against Hamas, which of course is using the people of Gaza as a massive human shield. Will this buy Israel additional time? That remains to be seen. We've seen lies regurgitated time and time again that has not had a significant impact on whether or not Israel pursues its mission and pursues its war goals. I don't think that this is necessarily going to change, but I think hopefully this will have some impact on world opinion and its evaluation on whether or not certain media reports regarding what happens in this part of the world are actually correct.
Right, and interesting, as you said, the UN, this contradicting claims made even up to today by people in the UN saying, no, right now there's a famine in Gaza.
It's utterly preposterous. I mean, we've had so many situations in recent months with different parts of the UN have spoken on both sides of their mouth. The UNRWA, of course, is a deeply problematic organization. There are other organs that have played more constructive roles over the past few months. It is, again, remarkable that an organization that is affiliated with the UN, as this one is, would issue such a report that would essentially reject previous findings by the UN and by media organizations. We hope that will continue in the months ahead.
All right. Well, let's focus on the Gaza front from the war aims, the security aims. The IDF does say that it's well on its way to breaking up the last standing Hamas brigade in Rafah. But what does that mean, actually, in terms of achieving Prime Minister's stated goal of totally defeating the terror group there? Rob Swift takes a closer look.
After weeks of operating inside Gaza's most southerly city, the IDF says its operation in Rafah is drawing to a close.
We are clearly approaching the point where we can say we have dismantled the Rafah brigade, that it is defeated, not in the sense that there are no more terrorists, but in the sense that it can no longer function as a fighting unit. Many have been killed, and you will ensure until the completion of the mission here to eliminate as many terrorists and destroy as much infrastructure as possible in the future.
But while the Israeli military has clearly caused its enemy casualties in Rafah, both Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad seem intent on continuing their fight. Rocket and mortar fire from out of Gaza, even from out of Rafah, have slightly increased recently, and attacks against the IDF inside Gaza continue daily. Israel seeks to transition from fighting a war inside Gaza to something closer to how it operates in the West Bank, launching targeted raids into the Strip as and when required, freeing up resources to secure Israel's northern border. But not all actors are convinced.
From our perspective, what it means is the importance of working on all these plans for the day after the conflict, because we don't want to see in Rafah what we've seen in Gaza City and what we've seen in Khan Yunis, which is the end of major combat operations, and then the beginning of Hamas reasserting control and reasserting activity in those areas.
Hanan, let's talk about how prepared Israel really is at this stage for that day after, and to make it as a scenario, even though it unfortunately doesn't even that sound so promising, making it like the West Bank, for it to be reaching that state of affairs there.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to make a remark that 2 months ago we would say Rafah is out. We were told Rafah is out of the reach of the IDF. Don't enter Rafah. Don't do anything. There are 2 million people there. We are 2 months later. The war is still. Nobody asking Israel of the influential parts of the world stop the war, letting us move on with this war, and now we are. Rafah is nearly only, I would say, the population 100,000 out of 2 million. So this is a miracle, which if we were sitting here 2 months ago, you would not believe me that if I would have told you over 1.5 million people left Gaza to save, left Rafah to save places. So this is one thing, and I would say it gives us a lot of confidence that we can go on with the third part, which is the part C, level C of the war. What the chief of staff is speaking is breaking the Hamas brigades and battalion as a military unit. You break their communication system. You break the intelligence collection system, which is, they have a huge, very intensive intelligence collection system, and a very good and I would say a very robust communication system. All of that is broken. Now, there are many of them, hundreds of them fled, but they can launch very, let's say, small operation, targeting with the RPGs, targeting this tank or that tank, but not cannot work as a military entity. Now, this gives the IDF the freedom to go to the third part of this war, is making sure that Hamas is not moving freely on the ground all over Gaza. Wherever Hamas operative, will it be a police guy, and any other controlling, I would say, symbols of Hamas will be eliminated.
Well, let's go for an update. Let's go down to our correspondent, Pierre Cloche-Handler, who's down on the Israel-Gaza border. And Pierre, some confidence being expressed by the IDF. But again, as we've been reporting, still these rocket launches coming out, as Rob said, even from within Rafah itself, threatening cities like Ashkelon.
No, it was a false alarm. Today, there were 2 false alarms. Yeah. And since the beginning of the month, there were 11 false alarms just on Kerem Shalom, one of the communities which is really adjacent to the border. That shows that the IDF is still very, very sensitive to any movement that could be interpreted as a rocket launching or mortar launching. But there's been no rocket launched on Israeli territory from the Gaza Strip today.
Right. And what about the state of the fighting there, not just in Rafah, but airstrikes, continuing airstrikes there in Gaza, even in areas, for example, of central Gaza?
Right, and I would say that what's happening in central Gaza, or even further north in Shati, where the sister of Ismail Haniyeh was killed, and in Daraj, which is an area in Gaza City, which is on the western side of the city. These are, I would say, part of the lower intensity fighting. It's mowing the lawn. In other words, trying to prevent from Hamas to reassert its control. So each time that the intelligence understands that there is a cluster of Hamas terrorists in some place trying to reestablish a terror site, the IDF, the Air Force actually, bombs the targets. That doesn't mean that the soldiers were in Shati or in Daraj today. It was an operation by the Air Force. Now, there are still 2 divisions in the Gaza Strip. One which is controlling the corridor or the axis which crosses from east to west to the Mediterranean Sea and cuts the Gaza Strip into 2 parts, the northern and the southern part. And that's in order to prevent from terrorists to try to regain terrain in the northern Gaza Strip, where most of the villages and communities are very close to the border, like here in Kfar Aza. So that's the role of Division 99th, to prevent any influx of terrorists to the northern part of the Gaza Strip. In Rafah, the offensive, as Rob said, is drawing to a close with 1 division, the 162nd of combat forces. Right. It's drawing to a close, but Israel will still assert control on the Philadelphia corridor because of the smuggling tunnels, the underground tunnels, which are very deep underground, which cut across the Egyptian border into the Gaza Strip and allow Hamas to refurbish itself with weapons and ammunition. And that will take time in order to identify and neutralize those tunnels, because some of them might be at a depth of 50 meters underground.
All right, certainly that is a key, holding that Philadelphia corridor, a key part of Israel's strategy there in Gaza, at least for the short term. Pierre Cloche-Handler there on the Israel-Gaza border, thank you for that. And moving on, perhaps not so coincidentally, just as the Knesset today approved a bill in a preliminary vote that would extend the age limit of IDF reservists, including those serving even in their 40s, the Supreme Court issued a landmark ruling that there is no longer any legal basis for the government to issue blanket draft exemptions for ultra-Orthodox men studying in religious seminaries or yeshivot. Now, this ruling may prove a political headache for Prime Minister Netanyahu, but with the nation at war, the court decreed that the call of duty is indeed a higher calling. Joe Brown has the story.
A historic decision with a twist of irony. Having spent the first half of his 3rd stint in office trying to reduce the powers of the High Court, the premiership of Benjamin Netanyahu could now come crashing down due to a decision from that same court. On Tuesday morning, Israel's top court unanimously announced that, after decades of military exemption, students at ultra-Orthodox seminaries, known as yeshivas, have to serve in the IDF. Furthermore, the court also ruled that the government must cease funding yeshivas that prevent students from serving in the military. The push for this decision was prompted by the expiration of a law in July 2023, which provided a blanket exemption on ultra-Orthodox Jews serving in the IDF, and the greater need for soldiers following Israel's multi-frontal war in Gaza, Lebanon, and the West Bank. According to figures from the IDF, only about 1,300 of the 13,000 young ultra-Orthodox adults eligible for service join the army annually, a rate of around 10%. Approximately 63,000 ultra-Orthodox Jews are currently exempt. The court decision has not gone down well with ultra-Orthodox Jews, who had received immunity from the draft since the days of David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister.
I think that only God protects us. You may think that the army is protecting you. That's wrong. There is only one who protects us. And so we will not join the army because God said not to join the army. And we only obey him because he protects us from everything.
But the ruling has received support from Israel's opposition.
The games are over. The shady deals are over. The days when some shout, "Will die and not serve," and others die because they served are over. The discrimination between blood and blood is over. And a more lukewarm response from members of Netanyahu's coalition.
This ruling actually doesn't have any implications, any practical implications. It's more of a declaration more than anything else. It doesn't add anything to the defense issue at this time. So it's very hard to give any credit to this ruling. It doesn't mean much. In fact, the High Court shouldn't have interfered at all in this issue.
And this will be Netanyahu's greatest political headache. His governing coalition, propped up by ultra-Orthodox and far-right parties, are opposed to this decision, which could lead to them leaving the government, forcing its collapse and new elections. Lawyers defending the government in this case said that forcing the ultra-Orthodox to join the army would, quote, tear Israeli society apart. But with the majority of Israelis supporting the lifting of this special dispensation, the success of the court decision will largely depend on the way it will be implemented.
Avi, let's put aside the immediate political consequence of this. Benjamin Netanyahu has shown a capability to survive a lot of political crises. But let's look at the bigger issue here, the significance of this decision, trying to resolve this issue, which has vexed Israeli society for decades, but because of the war now has really kind of moved to the forefront of its, I would say, of the public consciousness.
Look, Lev, as you said, this has been an ongoing issue for decades now, but it's, of course, much more acute because of the context, which, of course, is the war. I think the prime minister is in an unenviable position. I would certainly not want to be in his place. On the one hand, pressured by overwhelming public support for anyone and everyone to serve at this time. We know that they're lengthening the service of reservists because there's simply a manpower shortage in the IDF. While on the other hand, realizing that he has political exigencies he needs to take into account as well in the form of ultra-Orthodox parties in his government that do not, of course, view this ruling in a favorable light and do not want to see their young people drafted into the IDF. I don't see a situation in which there isn't some kind of a compromise that is reached. I think that is the order of the day. I think there is a huge domestic pressure on the prime minister and on this government to reach some kind of compromise that would see at least a gradual induction of those Haredi young people into the IDF. But the prime minister will have to pursue that with a great deal of delicacy so as not to bring apart his own coalition.
Right. Can I just want you to address one issue, because you hear a lot of the Haredi ultra-Orthodox politicians say, well, the army doesn't even want us anyway. You commanded a unit, 8200, the intelligence unit, where one could imagine where even those living an ultra-Orthodox lifestyle would be able to serve some very good key functions there in the intelligence branch.
Certainly, they are the best soldiers because they are, once they've acquired a military skill, they are the best devoted soldiers, and they are soldiers voluntarily coming to the military and to the Air Force, not only to intelligence headquarters, supporting. Today, Israel is changing. The military is changing. After the 7th of October, It's not more a small and smart military, which was the slogan we have enjoyed for 20 years. It should be a smart and bigger army, and this is what we are looking for. There are a place for all of them, both in the intelligence, but also in the fighting units. There is a battalion, a very good battalion, served in Gaza 2 months ago, with an excellent performance.
Right, and we should note there has been a trend, I don't want to exaggerate, of young ultra-Orthodox men volunteering to serve in the army since October 7th, and perhaps there would be much more if the leadership in the ultra-Orthodox community would at least give their backing. Again, not for certainly all of them, but certainly for those that are qualified to do so. Avi Meir, Hanan Geffen, please stay with us. We are going out for a brief break, but stay with us on our special broadcast, Israel at War. We'll be right back in a few minutes.
A new voice is about to be heard.
אתם צופים בערוץ החדשות I-24 News.
I-24 News launches its 4th channel in Hebrew, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
ותיעדו את הטבח.
I-24 News in Hebrew brings its international success for the past 10 years to Israel. Real-time news, sharp analyses, and passionate debates on the burning issues shaping Israeli society and the entire Middle East. And for you, English-speaking viewers, I-24 News offers a unique, immersive experience. Every day until 11 a.m. EST, Hebrew programs will be broadcast live with English subtitles. And from 11 a.m. EST, back to your favorite shows in English. More than ever, the heart of a new Middle East beats on I-24 News.
Será tu iniciación a la investigación antártica. Antes le llamaban
los organismos que encontramos como peces, moluscos. Entonces acá estamos viendo nosotros también, yo cuando termino de muestrear los pingüinos, analizamos en el laboratorio.
Welcome back to this special broadcast on I-24 News of Israel at War. But let's turn now to the United States and see how authorities there are coping with the wave of pro-Palestinian protests that often cross the line into anti-Israel incitement and outright anti-Semitism. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, in reaction to the violent demonstration staged by anti-Israel activists outside that city's Adass Torah synagogue, said she would increase security at religious institutions and making the wearing of masks at such protests illegal. Meanwhile, in New York City, Jewish groups and community leaders continue to inveigh against the decision by the Manhattan District Attorney not to press charges against most of the pro-Palestinian activists arrested for occupying a Columbia University study hall. Our senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim was at a rally protesting that decision the other day and filed this report.
Brag, punish crime, make sure criminals do their time. Brag, punish crime, make sure criminals do their time.
Here on Monday morning in Manhattan, dozens of Jews and supporters turned out outside the office of New York District Attorney Alvin Bragg to protest a recent decision to drop charges against 31 of the 46 suspects arrested inside of Columbia University's Hamilton Hall during a string of violent anti-Semitic protests back in May. Protests eventually broken up by the New York Police Department.
I'm appalled as a father. I'm appalled as a Jewish man, and I'm appalled as a taxpayer. This is what we pay for. We pay for that guy to do his job, and he refuses to do it. And I don't know why. It could be one of two things. He gets to decide for himself. He's either a coward or an anti-Semite.
Bragg's office justified their decision not to charge most of those arrested at Hamilton Hall because they could not be positively identified. There was limited security footage and most were wearing masks, according to Bragg's office. But reasoning simply not good enough for those on Columbia's campus.
If we have learned anything from this past year of emboldened hatred and anarchy at Columbia and worldwide, it is to believe our adversaries when they threaten violence. And that is explicitly what this group, the Columbia University Apartheid Divest Coalition, is committed to. District Attorney Bragg, you don't even need to read in between the lines. Just read them.
Alvin Bragg has previously been accused of going soft on anti-Semitic attackers here in New York, offering light plea bargains only to reverse course under public pressure. Some of those same defendants now serving hard time instead. Those here on Monday said that if Bragg doesn't do the same in this instance, they'll be turning to federal authorities to pick up the slack.
These cases need to be heard. And if Bragg isn't doing his job and refuses to prosecute for whatever reason, we don't care what the reason is, then we're asking the DOJ to take over, both to investigate and prosecute these crimes and to investigate Bragg's failure to protect civil rights of minority New Yorkers, our Jewish civil rights.
Reporting outside the office of Manhattan Attorney General Alvin Bragg, this is Mike Wagenheim, I-24 News.
Still with us in studio, Reserves Brigadier General Hanan Geffen, Avi Meir, former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post, and joining us also is Ilan Carr. He's CEO of the Israeli-American Council, IAC, and also the former U.S. government special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. And I want to ask you in that regard, Ilan, and also as a Los Angelino, if you say that.
I am transplanted from New York, but this neighborhood where this happened, this is around the corner from my house. All of this, it's very important that our viewers understand what this is. This is a Jewish neighborhood, largely modern Orthodox. And these protesters with violence, very important to say, by the way, this is the second such violent protest in 4 days. The first one resulted in vandalism of a synagogue 4 days ago. And then it came into a Jewish neighborhood, into the heart of a Jewish neighborhood to intimidate, harass, and truly frighten Jews where they live. This is very similar to the neo-Nazi party's plans to march in Skokie, Illinois in the 70s to say, we're going to come to where you are, where you feel safe.
To a synagogue.
To a synagogue where you've built a community, and we're going to destroy, we're going to shatter your sense of safety. And I can tell you that what's happening since that protest is repeated incidences. There are cars driving by waving Palestinian flags. Some of them pretend to swerve at people. There are calls hourly, virtually hourly, to security volunteers saying, I'm afraid to live in this neighborhood. And what that says, just think, Kalev, if Pico Robertson, Beverly Wood and Pico Robertson, if Jews are afraid to live there, the message is, you are not safe anywhere. And that's exactly what these people want to produce. These anti-Semites, these vicious protesters, what they want is every Jew in America to feel unsafe, and we cannot allow that to happen. And the fact that California is allowing this to happen.
Well, let me ask you about that, about the authorities. You are yourself in your resume a former, I think, deputy district attorney, yes?
In Los Angeles County.
In Los Angeles County. So how do you feel about how the authorities are reacting in Los Angeles, and I mentioned the mayor's comments, and of course also how the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg has responded to the similar incidents in Columbia?
Well, it's appalling. It's ridiculous. By the way, I was a gang prosecutor in Los Angeles, and one of the prime organizers of this anti-Semitic disgrace is a suspected gang member. And so this is outrageous. The authorities are doing nothing. These are the new brown shirts. And what they're doing is harassing Jews, and police are watching. By the way, the mayor of Los Angeles, despite her strong statements after, which I commend, told police not to intervene. She told the police to stand down. And so you have police standing at a distance watching this happen. This is not new, Karev. We saw this happen at UCLA, where police watched the violent outbursts of these encampments and attacks on a pro-Israel and pro-America protest. Police basically standing back and watching it happen. This is what's happening. And Alvin Bragg, what he did in New York is continue to perpetrate that message of there's only one side of accountability. You know, we're going to go after Jews. If there's any violence, we'll go after the Jews, but we are not going to prosecute the people who flagrantly break the law in their expression of anti-Semitism. Now, by the way, anti-Semitism is protected speech in the United States. But when you break the law, you break the law. And we have every right to expect that the law is enforced. It's not being enforced. Not in Los Angeles, not in New York. You know where it's being enforced? In Florida. That's where it's being enforced. In Texas, it's being enforced. In Missouri, it's being enforced on campus and off campus, because those states say we're not going to tolerate flagrant violations of law. We need Los Angeles and New York to do the same.
Right, with the biggest Jewish communities.
Correct.
And I wonder if even here in Israel, we just feel the sense of what the American Jews are experiencing right now, given the pictures we're seeing.
Yeah, look, I think we're keenly aware of the challenges being encountered by Jews around the world. We see those images, we hear these stories, we see the miscarriage of justice that's taking place in both New York and elsewhere, and I think the abdication of leadership. The fact that you have university administrators permitting these pro-Hamas mobs to take over campuses and then capitulating to them in the course of negotiations, actually accepting some of their demands, is truly astounding. And I think we here in Israel view this with a great deal of concern, a great deal of care for our Jewish brothers and sisters abroad. And we know that this is something that is a fight that we really share together.
Right, and you're involved in an effort this week that's going to be dealing with anti-Semitism, including, of course, online, which has become a major part of that.
Right, I'm speaking at an event tomorrow. It's truly remarkable. It's being held in the context of Tel Aviv University's Cyber Week and AI Week, and it is dedicated specifically to combating anti-Semitism online. We know that we are vastly outnumbered. That is not a war that we are going to win. We can't win on the numbers, but we can win with what we call the Yiddish Cup, the Jewish head. We have cyber capabilities in this country, and we have remarkable organizations and companies that have dedicated themselves to combating hate online. We'll be hearing from some of those companies and some of those individuals tomorrow. And I think it's really remarkable that that is something that Tel Aviv University has taken upon itself in really sort of addressing this issue as it is on all of our consciousness right now.
All right. Gentlemen, let's look at one bright spot, I think. I want to just get your reaction to that. A group of students from North America are completely changing their life plans, choosing to delay university and enlist in the IDF instead, trading the campus battleground for a real-life war zone in Israel. Our correspondent Nicole Tzedek has that story.
We all knew that we wanted to come to Israel next year. We didn't want to just go to college straight away. So we found a gap year between going to college and going to the army. Found a gap year in Israel.
These 5 students from North America decided to push off college last summer, coming to Israel instead and participating in Five Fingers Pre-Military Training Academy.
In a purpose to make those graduates that finish the Mechina to be and impact people on their surrounding, on the society.
The goal isn't to enlist in the IDF, but after 10 months at the campus, each of these students plans on just that, already envisioning where they want to be.
Combat instructor.
Special Forces. Commandos. Special Forces.
What really changed their minds since the program started in August 2023 were the events from 2 months later.
The biggest part was the war that happened back in October. I think it was just one of the most significant things that happened in my life and really just helped me figure out what I want to do.
My family really wanted me to come back, but I was scared that if I leave, then it would be kind of like running away from reality.
They're all choosing to face the reality firsthand, putting their 5 fingers training to use in real life.
As a kid from Canada, I don't do these special types of army crawls in the grass. I don't do this types of sprinting that the Israelis do. So it's a very different type of training that I had to get used to.
Oh, it's not our purpose that they will go to the army. I think that they live with this kind of a team that talk about the army, talk about values, talk about how they can influence. They automatically get in. I feel very proud of them.
As much as they want to help the state of Israel, it's also about what's happening back home.
All my friends are in college now. They tell me about the stuff they see, and I say to myself, wow, how lucky I am not to be there experiencing something like that, really, because I don't think I could take that personally.
I think it's so close to home, even though it's so far, because we all were planning on going back to college and learning. And after hearing this and everything that's been happening, and my friends call me all the time telling me the anti-Semitic stories that have been happening. And I think it just tells us that, wow, like we need to be here, we need to help.
Choosing a combat zone over a college campus, fully understanding the dangers they're signing up for.
If that means paying the price of possibly risking my life, that's what it means. And I'm paying the price for all Jews all over the world to have a safe place to live in Israel.
15 former students from 5 Fingers have been killed during the war, including one who attended the prep school just last year.
This really shows what kind of soldiers this place, the special mechinah, the special place really makes. These make highly motivated soldiers that really want the best for Israel, what's best for the army, and they're willing to sacrifice their life to give back to this country, to protect this country.
A country that wasn't always their home, but certainly is now.
I think it's a part of us. I think we have to do it. I don't think that's like they asked us to do it and we're like, oh, okay, we have to do this. This is our country as well. We came here, we wanted to do this. Okay, so there's a war. It's our responsibility, you know? We're very much capable of going to help people.
Which is what they'll all be doing by the end of the year, when they formally enlist in the IDF and join the fight. Reporting from Zikron Yaakov, Nicole Zedek for I-24 News.
And Elon, I just want to mention, it's been my experience, and maybe suggested by the names of some of those young people, those young heroes, that in many cases these are the children of Israeli Americans who decide to take that step and come back to serve Israel in some way, even in the army.
Well, they are heroes. How inspiring was that? I mean, you watch this and the love with which they're doing this. I mean, just total commitments and inspiration. And by the way, that's the answer, right? We have to stand up and fight, not run, not be afraid, but stand up and fight. Yes, many of them are. IAC is the community organization for about 1 million Israeli Americans in the United States, or 1 million. Right. And yes, a lot of these soldiers, these lone soldiers, are the kids of Israeli Americans. But it's very important to point out, not only, there are many. In fact, in 2 days, Thursday night, I'm going to be at the Kotel to attend the swearing in of an American kid, not from an Israeli family, lone soldier, 19 years old, out of high school. Josh, if you're watching, we're very proud of you, very proud of you. And this is amazing because what we're seeing, especially post-October 7th, is people are saying, look, we need to fight for our right to exist in the world. There's a fight here in the Middle East, in Israel, for the Jewish homeland. There's a fight on every college campus in America. You don't necessarily have to wear an IDF uniform, but to be a Jew today means you've got to have an identity, you've got to have commitment, and you've got to stand up and be a warrior, either in uniform here in Israel or on campus as a warrior, to stand up for the right of Jews to be free and safe and prosperous in the United States of America. Certainly in Europe, we're seeing that. That's what we need. We need fighters. IAC is at the forefront of producing a whole new generation of warriors, both in the United States and going back to serve in the IDF in Israel. And we couldn't be prouder of that, of that effort and the results that we're seeing all across the country. Our community and our young people in high school and in college are standing up and fighting for the safety of the Jewish people, and that's critical.
All right. Josh, we're proud of you, too, if you're out there, and Ilan Carr, CEO of the Israeli-American Council, IC. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
On I-24 News. Gentlemen, stay with us. We're going to turn now to Iran, which continues to push ahead with its nuclear program, enriching uranium at rapid speed. The IAEA is concerned. The U.S. is warning of more sanctions. And the UN resolution meant to guide the Iran nuclear deal and Iran's commitments is expiring soon. Our senior correspondent Bianca Zanini breaks it down.
The world is worried about Iran's nuclear program. The country now has enough near-weapons-grade nuclear fuel to produce 3 bombs.
Very concerningly, the IAEA Director General's recent reports again show that Iran is moving in the wrong direction by continuing to escalate its nuclear activities far beyond the limits of the Iran nuclear deal, the so-called JCPOA. Iran's nuclear advances, some of which are irreversible, have hollowed out the JCPOA and will continue to make a return to a negotiated solution more difficult.
The French, British, and German ambassadors to the UN gave a joint statement warning that Iran's lack of cooperation on the nuclear issue could have dire consequences.
Iran is growing its stockpile of high-enriched uranium to levels unprecedented for a state without a nuclear weapons program. Such activity has no credible civilian justification.
This after the UN Security Council discussed the implementation of Resolution 2231, which states Iran's nuclear commitments under the nuclear deal. The resolution expires in October 2025, meaning there's just over 1 year to find a diplomatic solution to the Iran nuclear crisis. This month alone, the IAEA, the UN's nuclear watchdog, censored Iran for failing to cooperate fully with the agency and said Iran has started up new cascades of advanced centrifuges with plans to install more. According to the IAEA, Iran is now enriching uranium to up to 60% purity, close to the 90% of weapons grade, and has enough material enriched to that level. Another recently published report by the Institute for Science and International Security said that Tehran is set to triple or even quadruple its uranium enrichment capacity at Fordow, which is one of the country's most secretive nuclear facilities.
Iran's accumulation of high enriched uranium, its continuously growing enriched uranium stockpile, and the expansion of its nuclear enrichment infrastructure are alarming. Such actions carry very significant proliferation-related risks and raise grave concerns about Iran's intentions. Moreover, Iran's consistent lack of cooperation with the IAEA is affecting the IAEA's ability to carry out its monitoring duties and impedes it from providing assurances that Iran's nuclear program is exclusively peaceful.
The Biden administration has threatened to respond to Iran if it further accelerates its uranium enrichment. On Friday, Iran will elect a new president, and whoever emerges as the winner will inherit the rapidly advancing nuclear program and the international crisis it's spurring.
Hanan, are we, is the world, the region sleeping on Iran, distracted, of course, by what's happening in Gaza in the north, and meanwhile Iran moving ahead, pushing ahead with its nuclear program?
No, I don't think so, because the threat of Iran is not only on Israel, Saudi Arabia, all the Gulf countries, Egypt, all the region, and of course the American interest in the region, and there's a lot of American interest in this region. So it's a problem of first of all, the American administration, and then all the European communities. Israel has to be on the guard and push the American to do something whenever Israel has the information on the understanding that something happening there. But right now, I believe we are part of a front that facing the Iranian problem.
Is it, briefly, Avi, is Israel part of a front? Is that international will there?
I think the international will is there. I think that it's a matter of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I think you see a coalition developing in this region against Iran. But I think you're right. I think Iran has effectively distracted the world by engaging up north with Hezbollah and then south with Hamas, we have to keep our eye on the prize. Iran is the head of this octopus. It is being engaged in Israel in a variety of different ways. It's trying to attack Israel from a variety of different perspectives, but ultimately comes back to Iran's nuclear ambitions and I think its goal of global hegemony. And I think that's what we need to remember today.
All right. I think for sure that cannot be forgotten. Avi Meir, Hanan Geffen, thank you for joining us on this program. And to close out, for those who follow such things, there's been some heated debate within, for example, the North American LGBTQ community on what stance they should be taking on the Israel-Hamas conflict. Tel Aviv, of course, is known internationally for its Pride Parade, which took place earlier this month. It's less well known for rugby, that contact sport that was developed in the UK. Here's a story that combines both those aspects and has some relevance to the situation now. Robert Swift has the story.
Tel Aviv is known internationally as a queer-friendly destination. So it's fitting that the city is home to the Middle East's first gay rugby team.
So very proud. We did a great job.
Rugby is not widely played in Israel, but the Ibex have grown since their founding in 2021 and now number around 40 players from Israel and overseas.
It started from word of mouth between guys in Tel Aviv, and we started a really small team, basically 10 players who most of them never had played rugby before.
Not all, but most of the Ibex players are gay. For many, taking part in team sports, especially an aggressive contact game, was not an option growing up. The Tel Aviv club has given a platform for its members to connect to their masculinity.
The Ibex is a place to bring your masculinity in a different way, to bring your feminine side and also to set free to your masculine side that some gay people tend to be afraid of.
Rugby has not always been the most comfortable environment for queer players. But this is changing, with just this month Antoine Dupont, widely considered the world's #1 player, appearing on the front cover of a leading French gay magazine. Ibex's journey recently took them to an international competition of gay teams in Rome, where they won in their tier.
Ibex is energy. Ibex has a really good energy. Guys who have no background in rugby or most things to do with athletics. When you consider that we went to Rome now and played in a tournament, Bingham Cup tournament, where you could say 90%, even more than that, of the guys have never ever played a rugby game in their lives before. I'm really proud of them.
They did so despite facing challenges that few of the other teams could even imagine. Several of the team's players were at parties close to Gaza on October the 7th. Team training was disrupted due to rocket threats to Tel Aviv in the weeks afterwards, and its members have been called up as reservists, some serving in combat in Gaza. At the same time, Ibex counts Palestinians among its team, a delicate coexistence that keeps politics off the rugby pitch but forces the players to encounter viewpoints they might not otherwise hear.
Basically, we become friends. So whenever there's a lot of topics that you talk about, and you can't really avoid talking about the situation in Israel right now. So it does come up, and everybody has, not every, but at least I do have a different point of view as a minority living in Israel.
As well as strength and agility, unity of action is critical in rugby. Ibex strives to be inclusive and at the same time cohesive. Homophobia is something the players encounter, including occasionally at their training sessions. But it's also something the team is confronting through its formation and its successes.
When I was a teenager, I was caught up in a very extremist, environment. But once you grow up and you sort of start to meet new people and you sort of just blow this bubble, say, hey, just whatever I thought 10, 12 years ago is just no more. Because the things that I thought and the things that I, believed in back in the day were just, to me, something just so appalling.
3. The team is now taking a well-deserved summer break. But with recruitment opening again in September, IBEX will soon be looking for its next international challenge.
Well, that's an inspiring sports story by any standard. I just want to update the story we just discussed on Iran's nuclear program. As I mentioned, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant meeting this afternoon in Washington time with Lloyd Austin, the U.S. Secretary of Defense. At that meeting, Defense Minister Gallant said, making this statement, "Now is the time to actualize the commitment of American administrations over the years, the promise to prevent Iran from possessing nuclear weapons." Defense Minister Yoav Gallant in Washington. That ends this program. Our special coverage, day 263 of Israel at War. You can continue to follow us on our website at various social media platforms and to continuing watching the show. And I'll end the program, as I do when I have the time, to express a fervent wish to see all the hostages returned home from Gaza as soon and as safely in any way possible.
A new voice is about to be heard.
אתם צופים בערוץ החדשות i24 News.
i24 News launches its 4th channel in Hebrew, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
ותיעדו את הטבח.
i24 News in Hebrew brings its international success for the past 10 years to Israel. Real-time news, sharp analyses, and passionate debates on the burning issues shaping Israeli society and the entire Middle East. And for you, English-speaking viewers, i24 News offers a unique, immersive experience. Every day until 11 a.m. EST, Hebrew